Hey everyone, today I'm here with Josh and Courtney from the Software Coach in New Zealand. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks,
Hey,
Tony.
great to be here.
Good. Thanks for joining. And for those of our listeners, watchers who don't know you, tell us a little bit about the Software Coach, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, we are actually a married couple, so beware. But Josh is a chartered accountant, so we rather than doing the accounting thing, we're sort of adjacent to business advisory, and we do software advisory instead. So all of your tech stacks, anything to do with zero, stock, what else? Job
Yeah, job
costing.
posting.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's helping people get the most out of their existing systems, coach in the name,
Hmm.
how people get more out of what they've currently got, or looking at alternatives, and providing the support to go all the way from discovery around a potential new system or systems, implementation of that system, training, ongoing support, and just being there to help people through the process. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, awesome. And what sort of clients do you work with?
It's a pretty varied bunch.
Yeah.
We've got some manufacturers, we've got architects, consultants, a few charities,
Engineers, yeah,
engineers,
anyone that
yeah,
needs job
yeah,
costing,
food
yeah. Mm.
manufacturing, cosmetics industry as well. Yeah, it's a pretty a varied bunch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
If
nice.
you sell time or products, we can probably help
yeah,
you. Yes.
Awesome.
yeah,
You sell
yeah.
time or products or both of them together.
Or
Yeah, or
both, or
both, yeah.
both.
Yeah, awesome. So we're not talking tech so much. So we're not talking the techie part of it. We're talking feelings. So the things you guys wanted to talk about was the emotional roller coaster of changing your tech stack. Why did you want to talk about that?
Because
Because,
we see it every day.
well, it's not just tech, is it?
Yeah.
Behind the tech is people. Oh my goodness, it's the people that are running it, and not just the management teams, but the people below them who get dragged along on sometimes a terrible journey. We try to prevent that, but it's just so hard moving from what you know and your routine to something brand new. And it doesn't matter how old or young you are, there is going to be a challenge in that.
Yeah.
And it comes up so often, and we wonder to ourselves, why has this project gone off the rails, or why has this worked? And it's often not because of the tech, it's because of how well it's gone with the people.
Mm.
Yeah, so we thought it would be great to talk about that
Yeah,
and see.
right. Yeah,
uh,
the real world
yeah.
Yeah.
impact of change on people. So what why do you think changing your tech stack is emotional?
People get very attached to systems. I've often found people that we're routine creatures, and often people have their routines that extend to their software. And it's when you put in a new system, it's never going to be a like for like. There's going to be things that are different. There's going to be a click that's over here or a label that's different over here. And what often can happen is the people that are more affected by that aren't necessarily the people that have made the decision to change.
Yeah,
Mm.
So it's
that's fair.
bringing them along with that journey and going, yes, it's different, but it will be better or the same as what you've currently got. It's just different. And for some people, where their routine is really important to them, that they feel there's a loss there, which can lead to resistance to that change.
Yeah.
It really comes down to people's personality profiles and how attached they are to what they have.
Yeah, that's fair. When I was consulting, doing what you guys do, and I warn a lot of clients about this. There's a big part of this process changing any tech stack, whether it's from spreadsheets or paper to a system like WorkGuru or anything else. There's a big part of it we call rewiring the brain. And I always tell people you will hate me for the first couple of weeks because it is
Yeah.
different, and all of your muscle memory and all of your thought patterns that have been this is the way we do things, they will change
Mm.
over the next couple
Yeah.
of weeks and months. And I promise you it will be worth it. But when
Yeah.
you hate me in the middle, remember we had this conversation. So
Yeah. I've had the exact same conversation with clients that says, yes, you're going to hate me for the first few weeks, but you'll get through it. You just need to persevere with it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
And there's this
Yeah.
misconception too that technology is auto magical.
yeah,
Be a
100%.
software, it's gonna just do it, and it's a myth. It's kind of like starting a new gym routine. It's gonna suck for the first bit, but you will see rewards from it. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's some myth
Yeah.
busting to be done there.
It's
Yeah,
sticking with it, getting the support that you need, recognizing that it's not you, it's part of change,
Yeah.
and getting those things. And if you persevere and work your way through it and work with your support base, that makes all the difference.
Awesome. So changing tech stacks is like getting a new gym routine. Does that mean we have to get up
like
early? Yeah, nice. I like it.
We're really selling it today, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm like, there's a couple of people buying this, but there's a lot of people switching off right now.
Our New Year's resolutions, it's all
yeah. New tech stack, new me, it's all the same.
Yeah.
So you've talked about the emotional aspect of it. Who gets emotional? Where in the organization do you see the emotion?
I would say that it depends, that the emotion's different depending on the position. So you've probably got sort of the higher end managers that have this massive optimism going into it, that they've looked at something briefly and they think this looks great and they've not thought about details. And then they're seeing their team that might be struggling and they're going, oh, they start to become a bit more pessimistic. So that's kind of the emotions there. Whereas I think from an administrator's point of view, or the people that are donkey deep in the data, I think it becomes sort of a frustration from them because the muscle memory's not the same, or they're trying to get used to it. Sometimes it's not necessarily all bad. Like we have some people that go, there's sometimes I've had changeovers where people have gone, is that all I have to do? It's like 2 clicks now, it's not 10. And they don't believe it.
Yeah.
They're like,
I love those ones. They're great.
It can't be that simple.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can, and it should be.
It can.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think it can depend on what system they're coming from, whether it's one part of the business or it's the whole business. Stakeholders are involved. It's a scale. It really is.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all. You touched on something there that I sort of wanted to dig into a little bit deeper, which is, do you see stages? You talked about optimism and frustration. Do you see little stages that you can kind of go, right, these are the emotional checkpoints? Talk about the stages of grief. Is there emotional stages of changing your tech stack?
Well, I mean, like you were saying, the managers are often the ones that are really keen and excited. They've got this honeymoon phase where it's all optimism because there's a new shiny toy and it's going to be great. But the problem is they haven't seen yet how it could go. And then there's the technical term for that is uninformed optimism. They're happy, but they just don't know. And then they start to go down as the more informed they get into pessimism and going, actually, do I really want to do this? Do I want to pay someone to do this to me? Maybe not.
Yeah, because that's where that rewiring the brain change aspect comes in, and that's the hard bit. Yeah,
it really is. And then when you're in the middle of an implementation or immediately afterwards, it's so tough. That's your valley of despair point where you're like, send help, someone. Can we go back? And actually we do get people that quit at this point, and this is really hard because if they haven't listened to what we've said about the toughness of the project or the things that they actually need to work on, because they're busy, right? They've got jobs, and suddenly
this isn't their day job.
So sometimes people quit, sometimes they ghost us completely because we suddenly represent the problem. But our most successful clients are always the ones who push through that and work really hard on it and actually work with their team and listen really well to the things that are cropping up. Because if they're not listening to everything that's going on and sort of going into this space where they're just sort of tunnel vision, that's when it can start to go bad. But once they do push through, suddenly the success comes and it feels amazing because it is doing what we promised you it would look like at the start. And
what we showed you and all of that kind of stuff.
Maybe even better.
Yeah, we had that I can think of a client last year that we had a change. They were an architect and they moved from one system to the other. And she was panicking in the middle of it, really struggling, talked to the accountant. The accountant's talking to me going, what's going on? And I said, it's okay. They're just working through some change. They've worked through it and now they're going, this system is far better than what we were on before. And I'm like, this is the point. We work through this stage. We look at what isn't working and go, right, what processes? Because that's the other part of this is if you're not willing to accept process change, you can't have a new tech stack because there are going to be process changes. You cannot get around that. And if there's an unwillingness to accept that, then no tech stack's going to improve it. Whereas for her, she had a drive to make it better. She didn't stay in the valley of despair.
Yeah.
And it made all the difference because now she's thriving and loves the new system she's on.
Well, people
awesome.
mistake the means for the ends, don't they? They're so attached to how they get there that they don't recognise there's a reason for this.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's the thing that needs to focus, not how we get there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So you're telling me that I can't just do the same thing and get a different result.
It's all a magical tech. What do you mean you can't do the same thing? Of course.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
So even when it is going well, do you still see the emotional aspect? Let's say in your best implementations, there's still got to be some emotional aspect of it.
Yeah, I think there's always a degree of emotions in there. Even if the emotion is, I don't know if you call this an emotion necessarily, but like uncertainty, or there's a bit of anxiety, I suppose, like low-level anxiety where they're going, do I still have this? What's happened here? So there's always a degree of that, I think, at a minimum. There's never no emotion. And then even if they're all positive, that's still an emotion that they're going through. So I think there's always, I find a degree of low-level anxiety. It just depends on how much above that it is. And I do find that level is higher if there's more people involved, or there's key people that haven't necessarily come along with the journey, or they've been in the room during the journey but haven't necessarily been on board.
Yes, they haven't been listened to properly. Yeah, that can be tough.
Or they found it hard to speak up.
Yeah, personality profiles matter. Knowing your team is huge.
Yeah. Massive. Yeah.
And how does that represent itself? Like whether it's anxiety, whether it's frustration, whether it's fear, what are the warning signs in terms of what's happening that people should look for, businesses should look for, particularly managers in their team or executives in their staff, to look for managing that process and managing the emotional aspect of it?
Well, if someone is sitting there in a meeting like this, you need to stop everything and ask them what their concerns are, because they're probably sitting there going, this is all very well for you, but I'm going to be the one that picks up the drama when it all goes kaput. And that person absolutely must be listened to, because if you don't, and they're probably the admin manager, you're going to have a very unsuccessful implementation.
I'd say another one is if they're normally someone that's really engaged and they've kind of shut down, that's when I'd be going, okay, this is a bit strange. Or they're starting to get, if they're looking frazzled or they're getting more abrupt with their colleagues or with you, then it's a sign that things aren't going well. And that's when it's a case of going, okay, let's just stop and go, what's going on here? Let's figure out, because sometimes it's not necessarily a case of a fix needs to be deployed or something needs to be changed. Sometimes they just need to be heard and go, okay, well, maybe we need to take a bit more off your plate, or give you a bit more, get more training in for you, or something like that. It may not be the system per se. It's just the person trying to process the change. Like if they're a detail person like me and they're having all of this detail thrown at them that's different, the chance of them getting overwhelmed is quite high. And that's not necessarily a system fault. That just means they need more internal support.
Yeah, humans are primal creatures. We're animals. Yeah, and change is by definition scary, right? Everyone loves change. They say change is as good as a holiday. Rubbish. Right? Like, it's just not.
What kind of holiday are they talking about?
I don't know. Apparently, they don't do holidays very particularly well. But yeah, no, it's a really fair. You've got to acknowledge that, and you have to work through it with your team, and you have to listen to them. But you also can't. This is a tricky one, because you can't always just say, yes, we can give you what you want. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, Josh and Courtney, that you're going to have to change your process. How do you deal with the balancing of acknowledging the team's concerns, fears, wishes, and wants, and the reality that off-the-shelf software works by you doing A, B, and C, not XPQ?
Yeah.
Well, listening can be as good as solving in some ways. Sometimes it is inevitable that the change is going to happen. They're putting in WorkGuru, for example, and they're concerned that their invoicing process might not work. Taking the time to train them, that's a core part of what we do, and making sure that they understand the process and that each person has what they need to hear and to learn is important. But
yeah, I think another part of that aspect is sometimes it's probing what they think they need, because sometimes things they think they must have, they might be talking about something they report on, and I go, well, how often do you run a report for that? And then sometimes it's the silence. I'm like, okay, so maybe it's not essential. I mean, that's not always the case, but sometimes people view something as essential, and then the more you dig into it, the more you go, well, actually, maybe it's not. Or it's going, okay, let's have some thoughts around what we could do to achieve this, but in a different way to what you're doing now. Part of the process we go through with clients when we do a discovery is we go, okay, let's understand what you must have and what's a nice to have. And we focus that the software does your must haves and does enough nice to haves to get you over the line in terms of what you need, because you're right, when you're dealing with off-the-shelf software, it's not going to do everything from A to Z. That's very that's going to happen.
Unless you go with WorkGuru.
Yeah. Of course. No bias here at all.
No bias.
But it's important for people to understand what they actually need, what they actually use from their old system. Like a common one we also get is, I want all my old data. And they go, well, how often are you actually going to look at it? Can we get it achieved another way? Because so often with things like that is they place a high value on something that isn't actually worth that much, and the cost of getting to that point just completely outweighs the value of having it.
Yeah, 100%. You touched on something that I want to come into there, is the nice to haves and the must haves. One of the ones that I always used to find, and still find sometimes is really challenging, is when the must have is a feature or an output that is part of a process that is no longer necessary. So that's always an interesting way. I must have this. I absolutely need this. My life depends on this. Why? Because it's part of this process. But we don't need to do that process anymore. And now you've taken away both a feature and a process from somebody. Weirdly, that's almost one of the most terrifying things. And for me, that's always almost the hardest one to deal with. But just because it's really hard to just say to somebody, you don't need that data and you don't need to do that process anymore. Because you're basically saying to them is, that's not your job, or your job is different, or is your job at risk now if you don't need that data and to do that process? And I always tell people, no, now you can just do more productive things. But how do you guys mitigate that? The isolation of must have that's now not part of the new process, and then the huge fallout that can be from don't need that data, don't need to do that process. What's going to happen to my job?
Oh, yeah. And people have their identities threatened because self-worth can often be in the fact that perhaps I'm the only person who knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And actually, that's really bad. If you're the only person who has a set of Excel spreadsheets and you're the only one who can do it, then that's not good. But in the changing of that person is going to think, what am I worth anymore? Because this is what I've been doing, sometimes for decades. And so
they lose their power as well.
They do. And you've got to help them to recognize that that's going to look different. But suddenly we're covering, we're acting as HR, as trainers and everything. So you've actually got to be really careful as professionals to protect yourself and have some boundaries when this happens.
Yes.
And also remembering that we are employed by the business owners.
Yes.
We're there to work for them. That doesn't mean we're cold-hearted, awful people. I remember when I first started doing
software. Your account, that's what.
When I first started doing software about 12 years ago, that I got told by my manager at the time that just prepare when you go out there to talk to clients and see clients and things, you're going to be an emotional support person as well. And while that's not always the way I want to run it, I totally get what she's saying, because it's people's meaning that I'm interrupting sometimes. And sometimes we make it better and the clients absolutely love us. And other times when we're doing things, it's a change that they struggle to adapt to.
Look, I'd say most of the time you make it better, we make it better. Like nearly all of the time. Like there are limited cases where that's not the case, and we try to avoid those massively. But it is a threat. Like we talk about efficiency and efficiency gain hugely important in business. With New Zealand and Australia both have high inflationary environments. Labor is very expensive, products get very expensive, so businesses need efficiency in their process. But when staff, particularly admin staff or bookkeeping staff, hear efficiency in process, they hear, I'm going to be unemployed. And that's a really, really tricky thing to navigate. So from your experience, what is the best way for a business owner or a project sponsor or executive who's running this kind of project to mitigate that kind of thing at the start of the project? So what can they do to prevent having key personnel push back? Because that's a big risk for project failure, is key personnel so desperate to keep their job, which is totally understandable. Their job pays for their house, pays for their family, pays for everything they do in life, and is part of their identity. How do you let them know at the start of the project there's a giant chunk of their day-to-day which is going, but we're not losing that person? How do you manage that, or how do you recommend business owners and execs manage that at the start of the project so people understand it the whole way through? Because for me, that's one of the biggest areas of business risk in the projects, where you have key people that will just reject the change because they're worried about their jobs.
Yeah. I think the first key part of that is making sure you're bringing them along for the journey. So it's making sure that those people are in discovery meetings, they're in demos, and that if they're not talking, prompt them to. So
don't just let them sit
there. If they're not talking, because sometimes with particularly with the administrators, is you can get people that are really quiet and they will probably have something really valuable to say, but they're just reluctant to do it. So it's prompting them. We have also worked with some clients where we've done surveys where we've got a bunch of people to give their feedback, sometimes anonymously, to go, okay, what would you want in a system? What do you like? What do you not like? To understand what people's needs are. And for some people, that's a less threatening way of doing that. In regards to if there's a major change that's going to affect their job, I think it's making sure that their managers go, okay, this is what you'll be doing instead of. Or this is what your focus will become. Because for a lot of people, if they're removing non-valuable processes, it's going, well, now you can focus your time on this. And it's giving them a vision of, okay, once this is through. But then the other thing I think is really important for people to understand is that if there's a big change of process where processes are disappearing and new ones are coming in, you're not suddenly going to have a whole bunch of time available to you the day of your changeover to a new system. It's not going to happen
not on day one.
No, it's not a day one thing. It's probably months away, depending on the size of the business and the volume of the change, because you're all getting used to it. Sometimes your customers and suppliers are getting used to it. So you're going to be dealing with more questions, more feedback, potentially more questions from the team under them in some cases. Or other people they're working with. So it is not suddenly the lights go off and you're out. It's helping them understand that this change will be bedded in. It will happen at this date, but it will be bedded in over a number of months. And once that sort of fades off, it's going, okay, this is what your job will look like over that time. Because people, when they change systems, it can take months, it can take nearly a year for some places to bed in a new process. And even then, like when you put in a brand new system, it's not going to stay the same way it was when it first went in, because you'll make assumptions about how it's going to be run, how it's going to be used. And then when it actually happens, you go, oh, hang on, we haven't thought about this detail, or this has come up, so we need to tweak it. So part of their role, particularly if they're heavily involved in processes, in certain processes, is they may be able to give feedback to go, well, how about we change this here? Or how about we look at it there? So if they're encouraged to view it as an opportunity to change things up and to use their experience to provide valuable feedback on what the new system looks like and what they can do, I think it's just giving them certainty that the lights aren't going to go out and it's a future for them.
I would summarize that and just don't surprise them.
Get
them in early, get them in often, don't surprise them. And then
Josh gets paid by the word, hey, Courtney.
That's true. I'm here to condense it.
I'm the detail person that can't stop. We just go one thing.
That's really good. Like that's a really good approach. Literally, just don't surprise them. And that can be hard because nobody knows what the end state is, because that comes back to Josh's point. Not everything's going to be perfect on day one. We always say to people, go live is halfway there. And whether it's a 4-week project, a 6-week project, or a 20-week project, really your go live should be basically that halfway point. And you go live knowing what you know about the company, the systems, the processes, and the people at that point in time, and you iterate over it for the next half of the project, basically, to make sure that it's bedded in, it's tweaked, it's set up the way that you need it to be for that company. But yeah, there's the day that we manage to get everything 100% perfect and all the people happy doing the right processes the right way on day one is probably the day I retire or I have a heart attack out of surprise.
That's true. And I mean, I've never seen this, but it's an opportunity for managers, bosses everywhere to have a bit of compassion and maybe do something crazy like have a launch day party, or treat your staff and go, guys, we're in the mud together, and we're gonna celebrate this together, celebrate the wins. It's gonna suck, but let's start really well.
So morning champagnes. So get drunk the day the new system's going.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be very exciting. I'd love to see that.
with on-site support from the software coach. Yeah. So we've talked about some of the scary stuff and mitigating it. Let's talk about the hindsight, because there's a lot of people that would be put off by just, frankly, the fear of change.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the good stuff that happens 3 months, 6 months, 12 months after you go live, and you ask somebody to look back. How often are you going, we wish we hadn't done that, versus, oh my God, I'm so glad we did this. When you have that 3, 6, 12 months review, how's it going? How did it go? How do you know that it went well? What are the emotions that you're seeing? What are you picking up from your clients? At that point in time.
Relief. Relief, I think, is a common one. I think we had a lot of that last year where people were scared about some big changes that were happening, and we've sort of met with them towards the end of last year, and that was about 6 months after they made changes, and they're going, this is so much better. We're so relieved that we had support to get through this. And while it was tough for them at the time, they've gone, this was exactly the right thing we needed to do. And now we're excited about these new things we can do that we couldn't before. So there's relief and optimism. It's the summary, I would say.
But it's also a process that exposes the rot sometimes in a business.
Totally.
And that can be equally hard, because a few months down, they're still in the weeds because that was never addressed. And that's got a lot to do with the success of, if they've gotten through that valley. It can take a while. And unfortunately, we can't control whether or not businesses do that. We can advise them to strongly. We're kind of like lawyers, we can act on your instructions, but we can't fix it for you. So we've seen some fantastic ones and we've seen some not so great ones, but I think a lot of the time it boils down to whether or not they've emotionally managed to reconcile themselves to the difficulties that they are in and actually addressing them, which again is not down to us, which is strange, because we've put in the software, but if the business behind it isn't what it should be, that's another thing again.
The way I would summarize that is, if your key people are on board from the start and they're embracing a change and they're involved with it all the way, your likelihood of success is way greater.
Totally.
If you have people that are detractors from the beginning that are involved with the system, it's an uphill battle.
So you'd say that one of the key success indicators before you start is get those key champions on board with them.
Get them on board. It's so important.
And identify the saboteurs.
Really.
Yeah, that's a whole extra topic.
Isn't it?
It is, because that happens. That happens.
Yeah.
Josh, Courtney, thank you so much for joining me today. Oh, sorry, Josh, you keep going.
Sorry, you get them on board from the start, and it just like the people that we've talked with that were in a better space at the end of last year versus the ones that aren't. The key difference was the team.
Actually,
the team. If the team is on board and they're willing to engage and they're willing to work through the difficult things that happen, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and you've got to give them a light at the end of the tunnel, or a reason to do that. There's got to be a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Josh, Courtney, thank you very much for joining me today. If people do want to get in touch with you and go on the emotional roller coaster of changing your tech stack with you guys, how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, they can get in touch with us on our website, or you can email us at just Courtney or Josh at thesoftwarecoach.co.nz. You can find us on LinkedIn, all of the places, and we can chat.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Thanks, Tony.
Tony.